In 2014, Florida State University law professor Daniel Markle was fatally shot in his driveway. It was a crime that has led now to the arrest of his brother-in-law, dentist Charles Adelson. The arrest comes 8 years after that murder took place and follows a conviction of hitman Sigfredo Garcia, sounds like a good hitman name, and Luis Rivera, who prosecutors assert were contacted through Catherine McBroom, Adelson's ex-girlfriend. The case against Charles Adelson strengthened by enhanced audio from 2016, which we've been hearing in court the past couple of days. Secret recordings revealing incriminating statements that link him to the crime. Adelson's sister, Wendy, Markle's ex-wife, had previously been entangled in a bitter custody dispute with Markle, which prosecutors believe to be the motive for this murder. The families maintain their innocence the whole time, but evidence and the recent arrest suggest a very complex plot to eliminate Markle and alter the custody arrangement since it was unfavorably resolved for Wendy. Confused yet? I am too. Bob Motta, defense attorney and host of the podcast Defense Diaries, is joining us to discuss this. I've been kind of just watching this one in the background today. I really dived in, and I'm still very confused about how the dynamics of this work. I got a little chart out with the yarn and trying to move people around, and it's still quite a bit. Bob, what do you make of this case and all the testimony that we've seen thus far?
It's a fascinating case, and as you said, it's been percolating for a long time with three trials because Catherine was tried twice, and ultimately I think it was Luis Rivera, he ended up pleading out,
Mhm.
but Sigfredo went to trial. They were both found guilty. Katie was found guilty on the second one, and then years passed, and then they finally indicted Charlie Adelson.
Mhm.
And Charlie and you kind of went through it a little bit, but just to give people a little bit more background, his sister Wendy was married to Dan Markle,
Mhm.
and they had a couple of kids together. Had kind of an acrimonious divorce. Had a even more acrimonious custody battle,
Mhm.
and uh, they lived in South Florida, the Markells, and no, I mean the Adelsons lived down in South Florida, and Dan lived up north a bit. Wendy had filed a petition for removal, trying to be able to move down by her folks and her brother, and Dan, of course, being an attorney, and Wendy was an attorney as well. Uh, they were fighting tooth and nail on this thing, and she ended up not winning that petition. And it's tough; those removal
Yeah,
petitions are hard. It's hard to just move your kids away from the other parent. Typically,
sure.
there's got to be some extreme circumstances. Um, so this thing goes on and on with them. Uh, the Adelsons' mother, Donna, is very involved in terms of the grandkids and in terms of being involved what's going on with Wendy and Dan and the court battles. And so when Dan gets shot, like in front of his house, he they immediately kind of figure out that it looked like it was a hit. And so they're able to put things together. They end up getting Katie, Sigfredo, and Luis. They get them in. They get enough on them, and they get them charged. Like I said, all three of them are in prison now on it. And so ultimately, they always kind of knew. They had a feeling. They being the feds knew that somehow. Uh, that the Adelsons were involved,
Mhm.
and they thought that it was stemming from this custody battle, that this just acrimonious battle led them to killing Dan so that that Wendy would be free to move down to South Florida. And so they start digging into the case.
Yeah.
They start tailing him. They do all, all kinds of undercover operations. There's this one called the bump where an undercover cop bumps into Donna Adelson, the mother, and starts saying, "We know we know that you were involved with Sigfredo and Luis, and we know that you paid them to do the killing, and we're gonna go to the cops unless you pay us money,
Mhm.
and like so. And this thing's of course being filmed, the bump when
Yeah.
he bumps into her. Um, so after the bump, they're of course videotaping that they're following them, really Charlie, but they're following the family in general to try to get video and sound of them talking about it because they want them to be talking about what they did in terms of hiring these hitmen to kill Dan. And Charlie makes some incriminating statements, never comes flat out and says we did it, always using so it appears to be code. Like, oh, because like there's this thing where he had said this joke that he repeated all the time. He's like, oh, well, it's cheaper because after the divorce, he said it's cheaper to buy you a TV than to pay for a hitman.
Sure.
And he used to say this joke all the time. So the state has been just hammering the jury over the head with this. So like, yeah, like that's just code for the hitman because like there's all kinds of talk about a TV. Oh, the TV's broken. Oh, the TV's getting repaired today. So when the trial starts, it turns out that, because we're all kind of wondering what's the defense on this thing going to be.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the defense turns out to be that Charlie is claiming that he was being extorted,
Mhm.
that Katie, his former girlfriend, who also they believe Sigfredo had a child with Katie. Okay, so one of the hitmen had a
I
child
need
with.
another piece of yarn. Hang
Oh,
on. Yeah.
dude, like that's what I'm saying. This case has it all. It's a crazy case. Um, but that Sigfredo hates Charlie Adelson because he's with Katie. And so this story comes out on the defense that they had killed Dan Markle because Katie had told Sigfredo about this situation where the Adelsons were going to pool together about $1 million to pay Dan in order for him to agree to allow Wendy to move down to South Florida,
Mhm.
which Dan, of course, did not agree to.
Yeah.
But during the course of that conversation, uh, Charlie Adelson had told Katie, he's like, well, I was going to put in a third of the million to help my sister be able to move down here.
Mhm.
And so that creates this premise that Katie knew that he had access to about $333,000, something like that. And so that becomes the motive for them to come up with this ornate plan to kill Dan and then come back and say, okay, well, because of this huge beef with your family and Dan Markle over the kids and moving and all this other stuff, that the police are going to think that you're the person who did it. And unless you pay us X amount of dollars, which I think they demanded
Exactly what he
$330,000.
had. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, exactly. That we're gonna rat you out. You like we're not gonna let this thing go. So ultimately, Charlie claims that he agrees to pay whatever he has in his safe, which is $138,000, which he gives to Katie, which Katie allegedly gives to Sigfredo, who splits it with Luis. And they then say, all right, well, we're not done. You got to pay us like this isn't enough. We're
Mhm.
going either we're going to rat you out. We're going to rat you out saying it was you that hired us to do this, or you're going to keep paying us. So he continues to pay Katie $3,000 a month, who is allegedly then giving the money over to these two
A
guys.
payment
So
plan.
it's the whole it's
Yeah.
as crazy. The trials is as crazy as I just made it sound. So today they just had the cross examination of Charlie Adelson on there today.
Mhm.
And it was really interesting, man, because like no one had heard of this extortion defense going into this trial. Like no one knew that this is where they were going with it, and no one knew if he was going to end up testifying.
Yeah.
So when he decided to take the stand, it's always a big deal when the defendant takes a stand, especially in a high profile case. So ultimately, he ends up taking the stand, and it went on for, I'd say, probably about 2 hours. And I came away from it, and again, like you stated, Charlie's a periodontist, so
Mhm.
he's in the dental trade, and he's a relatively bright guy,
Yeah, he comes across as
and
fairly likable when I was watching some of the testimony. Um,
right,
yeah, I mean,
right.
I've seen some analysis on this. Susan Constantine, who we both know, was talking about it, and she very much went down the road of guilt with what he's displaying. But I don't know if he just met the guy at a bar or something. I
Well, see,
would kind
you're
of,
the perfect
yeah,
guy for that.
yeah,
Like you knew very little about this
hmm,
case, and you're exactly what I'm talking about.
yeah,
I was on a YouTube live today, and I was explaining to people, like, look, if the jurors don't know all this background that we all know that are
yeah,
following the case, and you're just sitting in that jury box, and this guy gets on the stand, that's going to be what people come away with, that
yeah,
he's kind of a likable guy, and he was kind of believable.
yeah,
Like, she allowed him on cross. Like, I really thought, if we were using a scoring system, which we often try to say, do they make a point there? Or do they get a point? I think he won the cross. I,
yeah,
I think that he was able to, because she didn't control in Georgia. The prosecutor knows this case forward and backward. She's a really good attorney. But like, in terms of this cross, she just didn't control it the way that you want to control a cross. You want to ask questions that are only going to elicit a yes or no answer. And she kept allowing questions that were open ended, which
hmm,
were allowing him to go into these long diatribes where he's able to explain, he fleshes out their theory. He had an answer for everything she asked,
yeah.
so it's going to be interesting. And I don't think it's over by any stretch of the imagination. I think that she can pull it out and get the conviction at closing, because in order to believe the extortion thing, you have to believe that these two guys concocted this elaborate scheme to get this money, when it could have been as easy of just going into Charlie's house, sticking a gun to his head and say, "Give me the money in the safe."
Hmm, hmm,
And then it's done. Charlie's answer for that is, "Well, I didn't have enough money in there, and that would have ended their cash flow stream." It's like, but the concept of a payment plan, either for extortion
yeah.
or for the hitman scenario, actually, the payment plan for either of them is bizarre to me.
I've never heard of a payment plan for a hit.
It's
That's
weird.
new. There's always, I'm always amazed. Sometimes it's like, well, that's a new one, and that is certainly a new one. How is this reading with the jury this far? Because I mean, I know we've gone through this. I've been reading and trying to figure this all out. How are they following along with this in the courtroom? Are their eyes glazed over, or are they
No,
intently
man, like
figuring this out?
this story is so fascinating. Like, this isn't one where this was not a case with a bunch of boring expert witnesses where they're talking about science and DNA or ballistics or any of those things, where you typically get jurors that are just like falling
Yeah.
asleep in their chairs. This was all the story, and
Hmm.
it was all over here's, and you're getting, like, they called Katie, Luis, and Sigfredo, and I'm talking about the state putting all three of them up, and they all testified against Charlie, saying this was a hit and he paid us for it. So it was really, really an exciting trial. You didn't really have any witnesses that were like a snore
Hmm.
fest type
Yeah.
witness. You had the cops that were doing the undercover sting stuff, with all the overhears and watching Charlie through some kind of grate, and like, so it was, I in the state, in terms of the way they put together this chart in their during their case in chief, was probably one of the best demonstrative piece of evidence that I've ever seen in a trial, where they were able to show, in terms of the texting that was going on the timeline of when Dan's getting shot and
Hmm.
what people were saying via text message. and where they were going and where they were at and the things that were happening. And I think it was very clear in terms of this is what the state's theory is, and this is the evidence that we have to prove it. And then when the defense, and they knew after openings, like it took the state by surprise. They did not know that they were coming with this whole extortion thing.
Mm-hmm.
It completely took. That's one of the things that you can, that's one of the only benefits of being on the defense is that you don't have to give the state your theory of defense ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
You can surprise, like, and this is one of those rare occasions where it was like a gotcha moment where the state did not know it was coming. They were not prepared for it. They did not know that that was going to be their theory. So in terms of the state getting their evidence out to support their theory, they did a great job of it. In terms of being able to mitigate what I think could be a plausible defense to at least one juror,
Mm-hmm.
maybe more. Like, I don't see an acquittal on it, but I wouldn't be stunned. But I do see a world in which there could be a hung jury on it,
Yeah.
because he did what he needed to do on that stand today. She did not bury him. I was going in thinking on that cross-examination that she just knows this case forwards and backwards, and that she ultimately was just going to crush him today.
Mm-hmm.
That he was going to get up there and cave, and he didn't. So like I think the jury is going to be sitting deliberating after closings, which is where where Georgia's going to really have to bring the case home and tell people to use your common sense. Like in what world would these people decide to kill this completely collateral person in some ornate extortion scheme when they
Mm-hmm.
could have just gone and robbed him and taken the money out of his safe? That
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. And and it's like, so
And
like ultimately, I mean, we'll see how it plays out.
yeah,
It's gonna be really interesting.
one of the questions I would have, if he was being extorted, why would he not? Why would he not have just gone to the authorities? Why would he have not said something and made someone aware that this was going on to him at that point in time? If he had nothing to do with this.
Yeah, I mean, that was the state's biggest contention, like that exact point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but like mainly with like Wendy, his sister. So because like Wendy was she may have been the first witness they put on, the first or second witness, Wendy, the sister
Mm-hmm.
for the state. They put
Yeah.
her on really as an adverse witness. She certainly wasn't happy to be there
Yeah.
testifying against her brother. But they asked her, oh, because again, remember, the state did not know about this extortion thing until the opening statement.
Mm-hmm.
So coming right out of openings and going into Wendy, she's like, okay, so your brother never told you that he was being extorted. And they're like, no. And then I think it was Luis Rivera had gotten on the stand, and he claims that Katie had said that because the thought processes was that Katie did not want to tell Sigfredo, her baby daddy, who hated Charlie Adelson,
Mm-hmm.
that this hit was for him, that he is the one who ordered it, because she thought that Sigfredo wouldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So she just said it was about a lady in a custody fight, that's what they thought that they were doing the hit for. So yeah, man, it's one of those cases where you just never know where a jury's going to go with it, because you've got like, and I say it all the time about cases, in this case more than like most, is you've just got two theories.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the state's theory, and none of them were there for it. None of them were present when the murder happened. And same with the defense. They
Mm-hmm.
weren't there. And you've got Charlie saying, well, I was told not by these guys, if I tell them or family. So I didn't tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the bump happens, which is law enforcement, because he claims that he didn't know that Katie was the one extorting him.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, he thought that he was just giving this $3,000 payment to Katie, and then Katie was passing it on to the Latin King guys.
Yeah.
And and he claims that, so that's in 2014, 2015, where he's still in a relationship with her.
Hmm.
Because the state's like, well, so you're gonna have me believe that you're still in a relationship with the woman who's extorting you?
That
And
doesn't
he's like,
make any
I
sense. But
right,
but
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 he that
but
his
it is payment plan, so that may make it a little easier to have the relationship with a nice payment plan.
true, but
If it
his
was
answer
all
was
one.
he didn't know she was extorting him. And there's this one little piece of evidence that I thought was very effective that the defense just keep throwing in there, which was the fact that she had uh it was either a check bounce or she couldn't make a credit card payment. And so she had asked Charlie for $300. And he's like, and they use that to say, well, if she was taking the money, to go back to him not having knowledge that she was a part of the bigger extortion plan, and that's why he was still with her.
Hmm.
And that was their explanation, that he had no idea. He thought that she was protecting him
Okay.
from these two guys because she had some kind of relationship with them and she could keep them at bay as long as he kept making the payments, that he was going to be fine and he was going to be safe. So, but and that's how he explained it, like the period of time that he still seemed to be in a close relationship with her after the murder.
Hmm.
Because the state's theory is like, well, okay, obviously she helped you with this. That's why you're still with her. She helped you like make this come to reality. So
What about
it's a
everybody
wild
else?
one, man.
What about the rest of the family who seems to be somewhat tied into all of this? Why are we seeing Charles Adelson simply on being tried right now? What about mom and the others that seem to have some knowledge of something that was going on here?
I think he's the test run.
Okay.
I think he's the test run trial. I don't know that they have much against Wendy.
Hmm.
Like I don't know that they have like what they need in order to get a conviction. I mean, these cases are hard. I mean, like the hitman for hire thing. If you've got somebody who's smart, who's completely staying off the grid, who's never using his phone, who deals in cash and cash only, it's hard to get the evidence you need to prove it.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, you can certainly have a theory, which, again, in this case, everyone knows that common sense or Occam's razor is saying, obviously,
Hmm.
obviously they paid to have this guy whacked so that the kids could come be down, the grandkids could come be down around, the grandmother. And, because like, and they have even less against Wendy.
Hmm.
So, but I think that depending on what happens with this one, you may see charges against the mother.
Hmm.
I think the father was completely out of the fray,
Yeah.
and maybe down the road they have enough for Wendy, but it's one of those things where prosecution's not in the business of losing.
Yeah.
They're not going to bring a case if they don't think they have enough evidence.
What
So
what do we know about like Charles Adelson's just kind of arc of behavior through life? Is this in any way characteristic of how he's handled himself? I mean, it sounds like he's fairly well educated, has a business going, or at least works in a fairly high paying area, has seemingly a good life. Is this completely out of character? And why would he put himself in that situation? Was he very tight with his sister that this was really something that made a lot of sense, or was it more pressure from the mom and the grandparents of, hey, we really want to be close to the grandkids, let's knock somebody off? I mean, in lesser terms.
I mean, that's what the state's insinuating. That
Hmm.
the state is insinuating that mom is the mastermind of it all,
Okay.
Donna. That but again, it boils down to evidence.
Yeah.
I mean, like you have to buy the state's theory that all of these phone calls and all of this, like everything they were talking about, the TVs and the TV repair, that's code for the
Hmm.
hit. That all these phone calls and these text messages take place in and around the time that the thing goes down. um it's yeah, it's a tough case. Like it really is. And I think that ultimately, I think if they can get the conviction on Charlie, I think they might, like, I don't know that they'll ever be able to get Wendy.
Yeah.
I really don't, but I think that they might be able to go after mom,
Hmm.
just because of, like, no one commonsensically is thinking that this is just something that happened without them ordering the hit.
Yeah.
You know, it's too random. There's way too many coincidences. You know, it turns out that it's Charlie Adelson's girlfriend who's the one who arranges the hit.
Mhm.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like she's going to be arguing hard on common sense during closings. Trust me on that one.
Yeah.
Like, it's just going to be like, use your common sense.
What a
You know,
mess. What a
it's
mess.
it's a
And
crazy one. It's a
God knows
crazy one.
how that will end, but of course we'll keep an eye on that. Hey, it's Tony Brueski. If you want more of our interview with our guests, be sure to check out our podcast, Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Just search that wherever you download podcasts and press subscribe. Also, you can check out our YouTube channel for the full video version of the interviews as well, under the same name, Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Check it out, subscribe, binge, and enjoy. Thanks for watching.